When we bought the place, I told Mark it looked like something out of a postcard. A red barn, white farmhouse, acres of waving golden corn. Idyllic, right? What they don't show on those postcards is how quiet it gets out here. The kind of quiet that makes you hear things you shouldn't. The kind of quiet that lets something else hear you. We moved in early spring. The land had been abandoned for over a decade, but the soil was still good, and Mark, bless him, wanted to live off the land. I wasn't totally sold, but he had that dreamer's gleam in his eyes. So we planted. We fixed up the barn. We made it ours. The first weird thing happened in late September. I found all our tomatoes black and shriveled overnight. Not just one plant, all of them. When I picked one up, it crumbled in my hand like ash. No rot, no bugs, just gone. Then came the animals. It started with our chickens. First one missing, then two more, then a whole night where the coop was torn apart like something ripped through it. No feathers, no blood, just empty cages and deep gouges in the wood. We blamed coyotes until the goats vanished. Fence untouched, gate locked from the inside, gone without a sound. Mark still refused to admit something was wrong, said we needed to focus on the harvest. But I could feel it in the way the wind turned icy every evening, and how the corn, even in full sun, never looked quite alive. It had a grayish hue, like it had been grown in shadow. Then came the dreams. I'd wake up sweating, heart pounding, unable to remember anything except a figure, a tall man in a wide-brimmed hat, standing at the foot of our bed. I'd blink, and he'd be gone. But I always woke with dirt under my fingernails. The cellar was Mark's idea. He wanted to turn it into a wine room, but the moment we broke open the rotted floorboards in the barn and uncovered the old trapdoor, I knew we'd made a mistake. The air that came out was wrong, stagnant and sweet, like overripe fruit and something dead. We found stairs leading down, carved into the earth. At the bottom, shelves full of yellowed paper, mason jars filled with dried herbs and animal bones, and a crude altar made of antlers and stones. In the center sat a journal. Its pages were stiff, stained, and written in spidery ink. The entries began in 1891. A farmer named Elias Braithwaite. He wrote about a being in the corn, something he called the Watcher of the Moon. He claimed the land wouldn't grow without blood, that every harvest he left offerings, livestock at first. Then, over time, people. The last entry was dated October 3rd, 1901. It simply read, "He comes when the moon is full and orange. If you hear him whisper, it's too late." That night was the harvest moon. I begged Mark to leave. I cried, screamed. He thought I was losing it. So I packed a bag while he sat on the porch with his rifle, saying he'd stand guard. I didn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I heard him calling my name from the field. Only, it wasn't quite his voice. It had the shape of it, the sound, but not the soul. I looked out the window and saw the corn parting, smooth, like something gliding through it, something tall. I ran. I didn't look back until I reached the neighbor's house 3 miles away. They called the police. Search teams combed the property for days. They never found Mark. The corn grew taller than ever that year. Perfect rows, golden and full. They called it a miracle crop. I haven't been back, but I saw a photo of the farm recently, posted on some small-town tourism site. They'd repainted the barn, and on the side, in faded red, almost like old blood, someone had scrawled, "We keep what you give." I had always loved the quiet of small towns. After years of living in the chaos of the city, the idea of a peaceful rural life seemed like the perfect escape. Cedar Hill, Texas, was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. and secrets seemed impossible to keep. But I was wrong. It all started when a local girl, Emily, went missing. She'd been hitchhiking to a friend's house and then nothing. The police initially wrote it off as a runaway situation, but soon enough, other disappearances started to follow. A few months later, I noticed the whispers. The farm at the edge of town had always been an eerie sight. It sat in a remote corner, shrouded by thick woods and overgrown fences. Old rusted equipment and broken-down barns scattered across the property looked as though they hadn't been touched in years. The farmer who lived there, Harold Foster, was an enigma. I'd seen him a few times in town, always alone, with eyes that seemed too cold for a man who lived so close to people. He never seemed to speak much, and when he did, it was always quick, as if he had somewhere more important to be. One night, after Emily disappeared, I decided to drive by the farm. It was a quiet evening, and I'd seen the flashing lights of patrol cars earlier. There was a reason why the town was uneasy. As I passed Foster's farm, I noticed something odd. Several trucks, their engines still running, parked in the lot next to the barn. At first I figured it was just a late-night delivery or something else inconsequential. But something about it didn't sit right. I slowed down, almost without thinking. That's when I saw it. A shadow moving just behind the barn. A figure. It was tall, cloaked in darkness, but unmistakably human. They were dragging something behind them. Heavy, long. At first, I thought it was a piece of farm equipment, but then my headlights caught it. A body. A body draped in what looked like a tattered sheet. I didn't know what to do. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I almost convinced myself I was imagining things, but there was no mistaking the shape of it, the way it slumped lifelessly as the figure carried it away. I should have driven off, should have gone straight to the police, but something kept me rooted to the spot. I stayed there, watching for what felt like an eternity. The figure disappeared into the barn. I couldn't get the image out of my head, and it made my stomach churn. I wanted to tell someone, but who would believe me? Who would believe that something so horrific was happening right under their noses? The next day, I drove to the sheriff's office, but no one wanted to listen. Just a bunch of gossip, they told me. No need to make a fuss over nothing. But I knew something wasn't right. I kept my eyes on the farm. The trucks came and went at odd hours, and strange sounds echoed from the barn late into the night. A part of me was terrified to even get close, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening, it was only a matter of time before it came to light. Then, one night, the truth came crashing down. I woke to a knock on my door at 3 a.m. It was the sheriff's deputy, pale-faced and shaking. "You need to come with me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. When I got to the farm, I saw what had been hidden behind the barn for months. In a makeshift pit, partially buried, were the remains of several people, young women like Emily, all showing signs of violent abuse. And at the center of it all stood Harold Foster, his cold, empty eyes locked on me, as if he'd been expecting me to find him. The investigation uncovered a chilling truth. Foster had been luring people to his farm for years. He'd used the isolation of the place to keep his crimes secret, and his livestock operation had provided the perfect cover for his grisly work. The authorities were horrified to learn that not only had he been murdering, but also dismembering the bodies, using the remains to feed his pigs, who had unwittingly helped him dispose of the evidence. The farm was shut down, but the damage was done. The people of Cedar Hill never truly recovered from what happened, and neither did I. Every time I pass that farm now, I can't help but feel the cold gaze of Harold Foster following me, even from behind bars. And I'll never forget how, before they hauled him away, he smiled at me. Just a small, sick smile, as if to say that I had been one of the lucky ones to walk away. But who knows, maybe one day someone else will stumble onto his secret. I always thought a summer on the farm would be peaceful. My uncle had invited me to spend the break with him in Kansas, away from the noise of the city. It seemed like a good chance to get some fresh air and escape the stress of school. But from the moment I arrived, something didn't feel right. The farm was miles from the nearest town. The house was old, and the property stretched on forever. There were fields of corn that seemed to go on endlessly, the stalks growing tall and thick, their leaves rustling in the breeze. My uncle, a stoic man with a rough hand, was busy with the daily chores and barely noticed me at first. The first couple of days were quiet, just working around the farm, feeding the animals, fixing fences, and exploring the land. It should have been calming, but instead, there was an unsettling stillness that settled over me like a weight. Every time I stepped outside, the wind felt colder than it should have. And every evening, just before dusk, I'd catch myself looking over my shoulder as if something was watching me. I tried to tell myself I was just getting used to the isolation, but then it happened. On the fourth night, while I was outside, I saw it. I'd stayed up later than usual, helping my uncle with some repairs. It was about 10:30 and the air had grown thick with humidity. I went out to the porch for a breather, leaning against the railing, staring out at the dark expanse of the cornfield. That's when I saw the figure, standing motionless between the rows of corn, just beyond the reach of the porch light. It wasn't an animal. It was a person. At least, I thought it was. The figure was tall, draped in what looked like tattered clothing, and stood unnervingly still. I blinked and looked again. Nothing. Just the wind swaying the corn. My heart pounded, and I told myself I was imagining things. But I wasn't. The next night I saw it again, this time closer to the house. This time it was harder to convince myself it was nothing. I was standing in the kitchen, looking out the window when I noticed the shadowy figure moving slowly through the cornfield as if it were stalking the house. I froze. My pulse hammered in my throat. I quickly shut the blinds, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I needed to tell my uncle, but he just brushed me off, saying, "You're probably seeing things. The cornfields play tricks on your mind at night." He wasn't one for stories, but his nonchalance didn't calm my growing unease. I started setting up a trail camera the next night, mounting it near the edge of the cornfield, hoping to catch whatever or whoever was lurking there. I wasn't sure what I expected to find, but I had to know if I wasn't just losing my mind. The next morning, I checked the camera footage. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the clips. At first, it was just the wind. Then, around 2 a.m., I saw it. The figure. Clear as day, crouching between the rows of corn, staring directly into the camera. It was the same person I'd seen before, but this time their face was partially obscured by a mask. Something grotesque and unsettling. The figure stayed in place for what felt like an eternity before slowly moving out of view, as if it knew it was being watched. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. My uncle was miles away from the nearest neighbor, and the nearest town was a 45-minute drive. I wasn't gonna wait for whatever it was to make its move. That night, I locked all the doors and windows, and I sat by the phone, waiting for daylight. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was getting closer, that it was watching me again. The last thing I saw before I fell into a fitful sleep was the glint of eyes reflecting in the moonlight from the cornfield. The next morning I told my uncle everything, but he only nodded and handed me a rifle. "Keep an eye out," he said, "and if it comes closer, don't hesitate." That night, I waited in the darkness, the rifle cradled in my arms, my eyes scanning the fields. I don't know how much time passed, but just before dawn, I saw the figure again. This time, standing directly at the edge of the porch, staring at me. I took a deep breath, raised the rifle, and pulled the trigger. But there was no sound. No thud, no movement. The figure was gone. I haven't seen it since, but I know it's still out there, lurking, waiting, somewhere beyond the cornfield. I haven't gone back to the farm. Maybe I never will.